All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome to our session. We really appreciate you being here with us today on your last day of reInvent. How's it going out there? You still have the same energy you brought to day one? Yeah.
Even I do that.
Okay, so hi, I'm Joel. For this session, we're going to do something pretty different than you would normally see in a lot of these sessions because I'm with Glean. We're going to talk about AI and Glean and fun things like that, but I don't think that's nearly as interesting as talking to smart people who are in the process of deploying AI or have deployed AI and talking to them about what they've seen, done, and know. So I'm just looking at how many people are here in this room. We're going to ask some questions of our illustrious panel here, who I'll have introduce themselves in a second. And we've got some prompts for them to start talking about it, but I would love your feedback. We have one little problem, which is I don't have a mic to go hold to you. So if you have and I can't really see you very well because it's very bright, but I would love you to have the opportunity to ask questions of our panel as well. So if you have something like that, you can either step forward, or if you shout it loud enough I can hear it, I'll repeat it so that everyone can hear it well. But with that, I think let's get started and talk a little bit about who's who. So maybe, Marcel, we can start with you and we can do just a quick introduction as we go down the line.
Absolutely. Marcel Pivotal, I'm a solutions architect with Glean. I've been on the technology space for about 20-something years, doing a lot of networking, implementation across multiple hyperscalers. I was for about 5 years in AWS doing traditional machine learning implementation, and for the last 2 years doing generative AI workflows across multiple verticals with AWS and with Glean. Nice to meet you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rohit Balasubramanian. I'm with Deloitte. I have been with Deloitte for about 28 years now, which flew in a flash, I guess. Grown up in technology, just like the illustrious panel here. I've done a bunch of things, as you can imagine, beginning with ERP, data warehousing, and business intelligence, when that was a big thing. I helped stand up our big data business. I helped run our cloud business. And now I'm looking to bravely take the charge into selling services around AI and Agentic AI. Very happy to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ravi Amamuthu, Senior Director at DocuSign. My experience goes along the same way with the other two gentlemen, 20 plus years. I started in the database technology, so very well versed with the database technologies, data platforms. In the last few years, when the whole thing about Gen AI came into picture, so me and my team have reskilled ourselves to deploy many pervasive AI tools and capabilities to the company, and building the agents and deploying the AI solutions itself to the company. So we'll talk more about that.
So for those of you who are interested, this is how we sort of set this up. Ravi is in the middle of deploying right now and working with his team and leading them to really doing AI for real, for DocuSign in a meaningful way. And Rohit has seen it done a bunch of times at Deloitte across a bunch of customers. And Marcel has seen it done with AWS systems very extensively. So this is why we've brought these folks in to sit with you and to talk through some of the questions we have. So let's start with our first prompt here, and let's talk about the popularity of, let me see if I can make that happen. Let's talk about the popularity of AI and where it's going right now. So here's a quote from Gartner about enterprise software applications, including agentic AI. And so I guess my question would be, maybe we can start with you, Rohit, right? Like, are you seeing people today really deploying AI across 10%, 5% of their decision making? How pervasive is it today in where people are using?
It's a great question, and I'll give you a couple of thoughts on that. Right? We, as you would expect, as a professional services firm, we work across a whole host of industries, and in my role, I play across industries. So when I look at this question, I absolutely see AI in different forms, not just agentic, machine learning, now to agentic, playing in life sciences. We see it clearly in financial services, banking, and insurance. So yes, it is pervasive across industry and industry sectors.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is when I looked at this quote here about 33% of software applications enabling 15%, are we there as yet? I don't think so, right? But I definitely think that agentic is here to stay and grow, and this will only gather momentum as we come. But so to sum up, pervasive across industry sectors with certain sectors leading, and this is definitely the trend that we see.
So Ravi, I mean, obviously you're in the thick of things.
Yep.
At DocuSign. Mm-hmm. We all sort of are thinking our peers are doing it, our competitors are doing it, our employees are doing it, whether we like it or not. What are your goals here? Like, how much of work do you think AI is going to be able to take over for your team? How realistic is it that it will be able to take it over meaningfully soon?
Yeah, I'm just not going to talk just for me and my team, because we have been working with a lot of different organizations within DocuSign. I'll just say what I'm seeing, within the organizations, right? So definitely I see the shift. A lot is happening, and if you look at a few years before, there were a lot of hesitations, right, to use the AI because what we are uploading, what the models will do and things like that, right? We have come a long way, but if you look at it, we are actually said that, let's do the AI first mindset strategy, right? And with that, what we are saying, everyone in the company or my team also, that whatever you do, how can you think of doing first with the AI, right? Now, having said that, I know these percentages may have come up with some surveys, but will we be there at that percentage? I don't know, but the shift is definitely happening, and we have deployed a lot of tools, and we also have built a lot of tools, and we are in the thick of developing the agents for multiple business processes and so on. So I see the shift is happening. But one thing that I want to highlight with respect to the autonomous agents, that's where I think we are thinking a lot. Can that be really autonomous? And I'm not seeing that right now on the agents that we're building. But can we go there? We believe it can be. But for that, I think a lot of LLMs are actually maturing. And when we see the shift is happening from probabilistic to deterministic model, we'll be able to take those decisions very confidently is what I'm thinking.
I see that there's actually a semantic challenge with this emerging space of AI around this term autonomous. So I know that it can mean two things. One thing, it can mean that the agent is actually taking action and doing stuff without human intervention. But there's also a second way, just for everyone here, that people in the AI space are using it, and that is as agents that are able to sort of think and plan for themselves and evaluate their work on their own, but they still require human intervention too. Marcel, I guess my question for you is autonomous, like true autonomy where it does everything without human intervention? Is that, to Ravi's point, he's like, not so sure on that. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, what I've been seeing across multiple customers is focusing on the business outcome. And depending on the level of the agent, you may have some level of complete automation, but the reality is that today human into the loop is critical, evaluation is critical, making sure that the outcome that you're receiving is validated. So not only through a pilot phase, but also when you move that into production, you need to have a pipeline that you're able to make sure that your agent is behaving as expected. And as that progresses and you earn more trust, then you may become into an autonomous agent. But I will say I have seen few use cases that are completely autonomous.
And few that we might be comfortable with allowing to run without
Absolutely.
human overview. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to try this button again here. I may need to stand up. So you were all talking a little bit about, you talked about trust, and we were talking about several other components here. There's a quote from our CEO founder, right? But about organizational complexity being the biggest challenge. So Ravi, organizational complexity or clicker complexity being a big bottleneck. How are you addressing this idea of true transformation, right? Because it's such a people-based, trust-based, behavior-based item. And how complex an organization is and how an organization works is like the thumbprint of that org, right? How are you thinking about organizational complexity versus model, right? Like your technical coolness of what's going on in AI?
Yeah, so definitely right. I think some of you maybe coming from startup to mid-sized versus very large-sized organizations. I truly believe that the complexity is proportional to, in my opinion, the size of the organizations, right? But having said that, I just want to go back where we started the journey. So at that time when OpenAI GPT model 3.5 were released, there was only very small team going back and exploring what is it about and how can we use that effectively and so on. But very soon every single team started to play around and things like that brought a challenge, which is basically how many tools out there for the same for solving the same type of the problem. Multiple teams would come back with the different products available in the market. So one is the clear boundaries of who owns what, right? So that's one of the things is helping us. Otherwise, it's kind of everyone is trying to do everything. But the second one was that also brought another challenge is, okay, so we brought multiple different tools out there, but how do we take those tools to the teams or other organizations and so on? And the challenge what we have seen is, can you give me a blueprint of when should I use which models? I'm getting confused. Okay, you are using Google Gemini, when should I use it? Or Notebook LM, when should I use it? Or we have built our own internal kind of the ChatGPT with all the models available. So when should I use it? Then we were actually exploring enterprise search tools, which is actually very interactive, personalized, and things like that, right? So when we are bringing that many tools to the users, they were really confused as well, right? And the other aspect of it is, how do you enable them? How do you train them? And how do you develop the responsible AI policies and things like that? So those were, some of the challenges that what we have seen in the organization. But on the other hand, the models, if we look at it, we started with 3.3, 3.5. Now we are seeing all the way up to 5.1, then Gemini 3. So it's evolving very fast. But sometimes, this complexity is preventing us to, run at the same speed. So I think we had to be, aware of the fact that, the training is needed, the multiple approval is needed across security, legal, and things like that. So if you take care of that, I think this complexity can be minimized to some extent.
So one of the aspects of organizational complexity that I've seen a lot is, and probably Marcel, you've seen this too, is who owns what part of what tools, who's willing to give you API access to their walled garden of tools, and that's inside an organization, right? You might say, oh, well, I think that SaaS tool is owned by that department. Now I have to go ask them if I can get access for my AI tools because I'm trying to synthesize these things together. And to a certain extent, the AI initiative becomes the forcing factor of an integrated workflow that probably should have been there beforehand, but isn't because people are busy and they're working in their own groups, right?
Absolutely. So I can add one example there, right? When we recently came out with the MCP strategy, right? So where do we host it? Who owns it? Who will create the custom MCP servers and things like that? So there's a lot going on there.
So yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm a strong believer that organizational, technical complexity mirrors organizational complexity. So the tools are there, and normally as you go and implement those, you will implement it as your organization grows. So you will have data silos, you will have governance problems. So security is your best friend on this situation. You need to work with security from day one to be able to go across those data silos and those accesses, so you will be able to share that context into your agentics. You know, the frontier models, they move real quick. Like every other month we have a new model, but what really holds you down is the complexity that you have on your organization and how you bubble up that data into the models.
So, Rohit, I know you've seen, because you've come from a data and analytics space where every team has their data, how do we convince teams to work better together, to integrate and allow for the synthesis of their stuff? That's what makes AI work.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you used the word synthesis, right? AI, and agentic especially, is not about bolting an AI solution to a legacy scenario. It's actually about reimagining workflows, reimagining processes. And so and that's really when you get the true bang for the buck and the true value uplift. And so by definition, reimagining or re-engineering processes to judiciously put in AI involves business stakeholders, has to involve data stakeholders, has to involve technology, has to involve almost every part of an organization, right? So by definition, there's got to be a very strong AI or analytics strategy which calls out the active participation of all of these stakeholders in various levels of degree across the life cycle of even a use case implementation. So we've also learned, after stumbling in the first few years, we've also learned, how to refine our professional services, the strategic part of what we offer. And one of the things we keep front and center is, a strategic approach to roadmaps, a strategic approach to business value capture right at the beginning in terms of defining what those success criteria are, a very strategic and comprehensive approach to making sure that multiple stakeholders are going to be part of the plan, and then you go about delivering it. I'll hark back to the 33% and the 15% numbers, which were all positive and it's all good. But we also know that, what was this? As of last year, some 90% of projects were failing. And there were many reasons for that. But I think right at the core, the reason was that, all the different pieces that needed to play nicely to actually make this a success wasn't in place in different organizations. That realization is coming now, which is why we're seeing the uptick in these numbers and which is why we're seeing some greater implementations.
Yeah, the research is very, very clear here that AI does better when it is fed the right relevant context and that context does not exist in one system. And so we have a real problem where the technology is forcing the change in the organization because the answers you get from AI, if it's based on one tool, one data set, one silo, are not super useful. And so we end up if we're talking about really implementing AI and really transforming orgs towards AI, now we have to make a very different business decision about how we operate, which is hard. It's way harder than paying some vendor some money to get AI, right? Like paying some vendor to get some money to get AI is relatively trivial. I will say this is an important point that I think this slide brings up for me, and maybe we'll see a show of hands out there, and I'll try and do this. Who thinks OpenAI has the best LLM model right now? Okay, no hands, all right. Google and Gemini, like anybody? Yeah, we got a couple of hands. Claude, Anthropic, anybody?
I see a couple here.
Yeah, so I always ask that question, and then I say, okay, in 18 months, who do you think is going to have the best LLM model?
We don't know.
And everybody chuckles, right? Because we don't know. And so I think one thing to think about this too is if you over-rotate on which model, if you spend a ton of money buying a model, you will almost certainly be disappointed because we are in a horse race and you're betting on who's going to win. And that means a lot of people are going to lose. And so when you're deploying this, I think, Ravi, like you're talking about multiple tries and how we get it in multi-threaded and around the organization, right? It's really important to be open and have an open ecosystem so that you can choose it. AI is not done. The innovation is not done, it's accelerating. And so that's just one takeaway from here. Now we talk, and it just works like a charm this time, by the way. You have the magic touch. So here's a quote from HBR, right, about compatibility issues and data silos. So this process redesign, I think we've been talking about quite a bit, but Marcel, how are you seeing this idea of needing to interconnect all that data working technically, right? Because that's a non-trivial technical challenge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a few things here. One is you have the traditional connectors that connects to your data sources, ingest all that data, kind of merge that together and give you context. But in the last few months, we have seen MCPs coming into place, tools coming into place, actions. So almost every service out there that has an API, they are able to connect. There are AI systems that are being built for that communication to work. Now, if we talk about legacy systems, everyone has legacy systems in here, and they may don't have an API to be exposed, or they may have some kind of legacy configuration and technical debt that hasn't been worked on. Then you definitely need to work around maybe configuring some kind of wrappers APIs around that, and making sure you figure it out. How do you expose that data into the AI systems? But as it is today, and I believe that more and more tools will become available, you have multiple options to interconnect into your data sources, so you have a full view of how your enterprise data works. And that is kind of the context key that you are able to pass to all of your agentic workflows and AI workflows. The better the context, the better the response. Models, the LLM models, they are raw. They understand a lot of different things. We are looking into enterprise context. That's why bridging these data silos is key to be able to have good success.
And of course, so everyone has just done that, and we're in a great state now, right?
No, we are far away from that. And that's why MCP just came out a few months ago. We saw a need in the market of how to integrate and expose these tools to have access to these data silos in a different way.
You bring up an excellent point, and I'm going to tie this back a little to what we just spoke about, which is the real value of AI coming when you reimagine workflows. And workflows, for the most part, live in operational systems.
Yeah.
What we're also seeing is, in some cases, a reluctance, for many reasons, but a reluctance to give access to operational systems. They are really guarded, right? They're the jewels, and so no one wants to give you access. So this actually creates a tension, if you think about it. On one side, we're talking about agents which can work in a reimagined process. On the other side, we're saying, no, all that is good, but don't touch my system. And funnily enough, at least as an interim state, what we're seeing in a few organizations across industries is I won't call it the re-emergence, but the re-importance of things such as a data lake.
Absolutely.
Which we thought, listen, is going to be passé because now we're going into AI and agentic AI. Lakes are going to go away. No, they're not, because in many organizations they're saying, hang on, yes, you need data because you need to get to context for your AI to really work. We will get you the data from our systems, and then you run that off of your lake in some way, shape, or form. Very interesting. So there are all these interim architectures which we are actually living through right now.
I think there's a mistake that I've made and that I've seen made in the media, which is People don't want to give up their special operational data because they're afraid their jobs are going to go away or whatever. But I think psychologically, that misses the fact that we've been training those teams that own mission critical operational data to be incredibly secure about it, very worried about its availability, very worried about whether or not it's accurate, correct, and ready. And it's almost that they don't trust us to take it out of their operational arm because they've had beaten into them for the last decade. Make sure it's perfect, make sure it's always working, make sure it's always available, make sure the data is clean. And they can't trust us to do it. I think it's less about, oh no, my job's going to go away, and more about, this data is really important to our company.
Let's work together. Make sure that all that knowledge that that you have, bring it into the AI ecosystem.
Yeah, Ravi.
No, what I was trying to add was, I think I agree with you. I think there's one set of folks, like what you said, right? They want the operational data, but then probably there's some security or fear on the job and so on. But the other set I have seen, what I have seen is that probably, they're not into the AI world, and hence they are really, really afraid. And probably they feel it's risky to expose my data to the AI. And with all the models that we work with, we clearly have a policy. I think it is put in the MSCS as well, saying that no models will train using the enterprise data and so on. The other aspect is basically, everybody going through the responsible AI policies and trainings will also help to alleviate some of the problems that you are raising and so on. So bring them more awareness, in my opinion, automatically they feel that, okay.
Well, and we have this huge bias here. You're an AI expert. You're an AI expert.
Yeah.
You're an AI expert. We're like, why are you not helping us? But you also quoted a lot of these projects fail number. I don't know if it's 90. Well, like, we could have a long discussion about whether or not that number is correct, but I think the specter of failure is weighing over their heads too. Like, why should we trust you? And what I think we see at Glean is that there are two sets. If you just look at segmenting people who are interested in us into two groups, there's those who are looking for a great AI solution that come to us because they love our AI solution. But the majority are people who are looking for a solution, and it may or may not have AI in it, right? And we as AI experts immediately leap to the AI is the solution answer, but they're just trying to solve a problem. They're trying to solve a business problem, and we're like, AI, and I think there's some trust we lose there too.
You want any questions from the audience?
Yeah, so we just passed the halfway mark here. So I do want to encourage you to ask any questions. So if anybody's got them, probably the best way to do is to holler them loudly, and then I'll repeat them. If anybody's got any specifically, we got a whole bunch of these slides with quotes on them, so we can go all day. But we want to make it as useful to you as possible. All right, well, don't be a stranger. Holler or come right up here and ask us as questions arise in your head. We'd be happy to do it. So I want to pivot a little bit to this next one, because this is one that's close to me as a Glean person, that I think is a change in what the industry is thinking about when they're thinking about AI. So Glean has built this tool that allows people to very quickly and efficiently make agents. And yet when we look at the agents which get the most use across our customer base, they're ones that have been built by specialists over years. Now, look, I work at Glean, I have agents I run every day that do all kinds of cool tasks for me. It's very nice. I would love to show it off. It's fantastic. But these really transformational agents take time and work. And so from this McKinsey study, I think it's really interesting to think that, like, an individual employee is looking at a future where they can use AI to make a recurrent workflow or to make their life easier. But that is seldom transformational for an organization. So Ravi, how do you think about, like, who do you let build agents? How do those agents, would you think about them being shared, or if they're being shared, or are you there yet? Like how do you think about who you let do that, how you promote it to the whole org? Where does that innovation come from? It's a thorny question that builds on our idea of, like, organizational change too.
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, right, so I have been on the AI journey, specifically Gen AI journey, for the last 3 to 4 years now. And when we started it, I could see the reluctance to use AI, and partly because we don't know, partly because they are really afraid to use and so on. Compared to where we started, now, when I'm talking to the business people, their interactions, actually they are very well now in developing Google Gems. I'll go to the agents. And that's where they started, right? Because the Glean agents is a recent things for us. But there are some good people from the business side I see who created the gems and then shared the gems also across their organizations and so on. And so we do have that internal version of the ChatGPT kind, GPT that we developed. Even there, I think people started doing that. When it comes to this one, there are two types of agents that we can build. One is the no-code agents, is what I think the Glean is very good at it. And there are high code agents or the medium code agents. So that's where the sort of the crew AI platform things need to come into picture. But for that we need a lot of IT teams, right? Who has the programming knowledge of going through multiple workflows and things like that. But I see the business side is learning these type of the agents building is on the rise, right? And I could clearly see them. They're trying to come to me or my team. Hey, this is the idea that I have it. Can I run it through the agents and so on. So definitely I see the changes happening in the right direction. But sometimes we might need to help to some extent. But one thing that I really wanted to highlight is basically whoever is actually building the skill set specifically around the prompt and how the context works, the intricacies of the model, how do I use the model for various purposes with the specific context, I think they are going to be the king. And I have literally seen the business is also trying to bring their use cases and develop the agents.
So how many people out here have actually built an agent themselves? It's really, okay, oh good, lots of hands. Excellent. Yeah, I think you're right. Like there's kind of a pro code way of looking at this and a no low code way of looking at this.
One thing I want to highlight basically, I was thinking that my specific, I don't want to name the organizations, I was thinking that they are never going to be building the agents, but they themselves are coming forward and then say, yeah, they are more sensitive organizations. And they say, hey, Ravi, tell me how do I build it? I want to use it and things like that, which is a good sign compared to where we started and things like that. But as I said, it's a long way to go in the journey.
Yeah. So Rohit, how do you see organizations structuring themselves to build, I guess, for lack of a better term, an agent pipeline from sort of like ideation to, like, have you seen that? And how do you see them sort of structuring how they work?
Absolutely. And I'll first answer the question that you asked. Literally is a billion-dollar question, which is who should be building your agents?
Right.
And the answer is Deloitte Consulting Professional Services.
Wow.
No, we really are top on the top right of the Gartner quadrant. Look us up, but that was a joke. When I look at
$10 afterwards.
But when I look at this quote, this is actually a peek into the future. But it's not just a random peek. There are these few promises that agentic AI come with. The first promise is abstraction of complexity. So whenever we are talking about building a complex solution, there's technical complexity, architectural complexity, coding complexity, what have you. And so this promise of being able to abstract that out is huge, number one. The second thing is, when you build a solution, as probably almost all of you know, it usually involves all kinds of data and lots of data. So autonomous data management is another promise of agentic AI. And then last but not least, what these agents really do is they plan, they reason, and they execute. If you take all these three things together, it naturally leads you to a situation where users can leverage these promises, as I call them, and now maybe in the future even communicate in just natural language, focus on higher value tasks such as business requirements and business logic. Of course, there's a place for human in the loop in all of this. But you see where I'm going with this? An evolution to where more and more business side employees will be able to create these kinds of solutions. Are they going to create super complex solutions? Is that going to happen next year? I don't think so. But this is a very futuristic, but a very plausible look at how things are going to evolve.
Yep, absolutely.
So Marcel, when you've looked across companies that are doing this, how much trust does a company have in letting an individual build an agent and do autonomous things, or individual things with corporate data? I mean, are they letting them do that? Are they letting every rank and file person do it? I mean, we're at Glean, so they let us all do whatever we want with agents because we're playing with it all day long. But what are you seeing out in the real world?
Yeah, there are two different perspectives. One is let it loose and start creating agents. And the chances are that it will become a problem in the future, duplicate agents without the real context, without the real authorization. And the second one is putting some kind of governance in place. But just taking a step back, the way I approach on my conversation with customers is like a kind of a 3 steps approach. One is enablement. You need to enable these business users. What is the concept of building agents? Goes back to how to create a prompt. What are the best practices? Having like internal documentation, internal library of best prompts. Then the second one is about having guardrails in place, technical guardrails into what access are you giving these employees to create these agents? What will be the data sources? And then the third one is business users have so much knowledge about these processes and workflows. They've been doing this on a daily basis across multiple solutions. Opening an Excel spreadsheet, then going into a CRM, putting all that together, doing pivot tables. So there is so much knowledge of how to implement these that the understanding of how a human will do it needs to be implemented on the process of creating an agent. Every time I'm talking with customers, as soon as they start talking about the business outcome, my first question is like, how would a human do it? Can you walk me through how one of your employees do it? And then we can start talking about the technical parts of how to do it. So that will be, I think, that the 3 main components of how to enable business users to start creating agents. And of course, having the guardrails and the security. I go back to security team is your best friend. The earliest you get them into the process, the more quickly you will move implementing Agentic AI.
That's a truism of business process automation. Can you do it once? Because if you can't do it once, I can't automate it, right? Like it doesn't work like that. Yeah, Ravi.
Can I just add it? Because right now I'm in the middle of developing a agent sharing governance strategy. Because this year has been the agentic world and so on. So the real problem is not deciding who can create the agents, but what the agent can do and who it will be shared with. Is it going to be shared with 5 to 6 people just as a digital assistant for themselves? Or is it going to be shared at the department level, like 2,000 to 3,000 people will use it? Or is it going to be shared at the company level where 7 or 10, tens and thousands of people can use it and things like that. But that's where I think my friend Marshall says, right, security is the number 1 friend for you, but not just security, right? So if somebody is going to develop an agent for HR, for hiring process or recruitment or whatever, right, their performance lighting and things like that, that's becoming a bigger topic. Right? Because now, how do you ensure that it's not hallucinating? How do you ensure that it's not biasing? Or can the manager take the agent and run with that and then just write it, just like what the agent gave the answer? What if it was wrong? And I think a lot goes in the agent sharing. So it's not about just who can create it, but where the complexity comes in, who are you going to share with, and what's the process you have around the hallucinating governance and so on.
I love what you're saying there, because I think when I think about it philosophically, right? So first of all, you have to have guardrails so nobody breaks anything. I think that's the baseline, right? But philosophically, I think about it like a software person. I think what we have to do is think about this as we're creating software assets. And Glean subscribes to the we're not better than anybody else mentality when we're doing this. We ask a lot of questions of our customers that lets us know what we should build so that we're building things that are useful. And that's the same mentality we have to bring here, right? Which is, what are they, to Marcel's point, they know what's needed. They know how it works. It is impossible to pretend that me as an IT person
will know that.
who's inserted into this department is going to magically be a genius in the department, right? So I liked what you said about who's it shared with, Ravi. I think that's really important, right? We need the innovation on the individual side to identify what needs to be done and to build that prototype. But then we also need someone who is an expert to look at that prototype, harden it, refine it, and promote it to the organization in a way that it is then usable and shareable and repeatable.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can get away with either half, but I think organizations fail when they assume the end user in the business will independently create it and it'll work out great. I think that's a failure mode. But I think the other failure mode is IT will make it and push it into your org, and that is another failure mode, right? Like these two sides have to work together.
You're just spot on it. That's where the governance structure, we are in the process of creating it.
Yeah.
Like in the traditional model, like you said, it was IT creating solutions and rolling them out and the business using them. Here we are going all the way to the other end of the spectrum and saying business is going to create, and and then everything that we spoke about in terms of governance, et cetera, comes into play. I really think, as we get to maturity, in this particular AI case, I think we will probably end up with some kind of an organizational construct where you have, for lack of a better term, an AI COE, which is more of an enabler in organizations.
Yep.
So you still have business side employees building stuff, but it is in a very governed way with the right tooling and the right processes and everything that goes with it.
And then we're seeing that in a ton of our customers, right?
Absolutely.
We're seeing that there's an AI expert who works alongside the business expert to just, first of all, identify it. There is some interesting thoughts here, though, that AI is bringing. So we have an agent that we run internally these days, which is, what agent should I build agent? It looks at all the things I do all day in the context of what I'm up to, and it says, hey, you might want to identify the following workflows that you did yesterday. That's a really interesting thought that AI is now being used to make that AI go, right? And Marcel, you mentioned prompts too. So quick show of hands, who's taken prompt engineering classes? Okay, we got some hands up, great. Why? Who's familiar with the term prompt engineering? Okay, many hands. All right. So prompt engineering is learning how to write and ask the correct questions of AI to get the correct answers back, right? So that's why we take prompt engineering. So why is AI so dumb that it can't ask you to clarify when you give it something that's ambiguous? Well, it can be. And so this next generation of AI that we're seeing is actually, when you write a bad agent, there's a possibility that agent then says, you didn't write me very well. Can we clean me up? And fixes it, or writes itself.
Yeah, this ambiguity is becoming critical even on the foundational models. Today, when you do create a prompt and send it to a foundational model, one of the first steps they run is, how ambiguous is this question? How can I improve it? What is really the content and the intent of the end user? And that's what normally is passed to the LLM to create the response. So more and more, we're working on trying to break that ambiguity around how the prompt is created.
Yeah, when you ask questions of an AI, the first thing it should do is interrogate the question you asked and figure out what you're looking for and know more about you. So there's a whole context angle there that's really super important. All right, so we're coming up towards the end here, so all your many questions are flowing in. If you have any, please feel free to ask them. Like I said, I put in so many quotes here we could go for the next week if you're willing to sit with us. So let's talk a little bit about value first in the last, say, 10 minutes of what we have here. So KPMG did a little bit of a study to figure out when we're going to see the results of AI and its value, and they said it's achieved incrementally. I think as AI biased people sitting here on the stage talking AI, we're all like, yay, AI's the answer, there's some magic there. How do you view, Ravi, in your org, measuring, quantifying value that you actually get, and how do you properly set expectations upwards that this isn't a panacea or a magic wand? Like, how do you think about conveying that knowledge both down into the org and up into management?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most challenging tasks today. I am actually asked to build a dashboard that will say the value the AI tools are bringing to the organization. I'm really struggling, right? Because today, most of the tools that what we built it are, what we purchased and rolled out are actually very good in telling in terms of effective utilization. Okay, how many people are using it, how long they used it, and so on. But it doesn't tell what for they used it, because we are not supposed to go and look at what people are doing it, or how, what value it brought it, and things like that. So we are still brainstorming specifically on this topic. I don't think that my answer is going to be very, very helpful, but some, if you know somebody, maybe I'm eager to learn as well.
Well, we have a hard time generally as an industry measuring productivity. So the first question for this should always be, so how do you measure productivity without AI? I can deploy AI and we can see if it changes that number. And then people are like, well, I don't really know that either, right? So yeah, sorry, right.
No, I was going to add to what you said, which is this entire notion about value measurement on tooling, I feel when it comes to AI and agentic AI is not the right question that we're looking at. If the entire premise of AI is to re-engineer business processes, then all those use cases that you're going to identify should have a very robust set of KPIs built in right even before you start building anything to say, here is how I'm going to measure value uplift. And so the value uplift is from a business perspective measured that much more easily, quote unquote, right? As opposed to saying, hey, how's my tooling doing and is that really a measure of value? So I think that is huge. And we are actually, what we do is we embed change management just in its entirety. Value is just one part of it. It is the upskilling. It is actually a target state operating model which looks very different from what you have today. It is how do I communicate and make sure that people are A, not freaked out, and B, they're truly, the users are truly adopting once you start rolling things out. So there's a whole host of threads which goes into change management, specifically when it comes to AI and agentic AI, and that, as a part of our approach, is front and center. So very, very purposefully, when we stand up teams to develop AI solutions in different organizations, we actually call it the right side and the left side of the brain working together, where we have business teams with change management value and all of that, and technology teams working hand in hand with the organization's users and other teams as well.
I think sometimes this business value focused consulting gets a bad name because it can be a little soft and we're all nerds. So we're like, so that's great, but how do you automate it, right? But it's so important in AI because of the synthetic nature of what AI is doing that's really important. And to your point, Marcel, you were talking about we need to make sure we're talking to security when we get started. We also need to be, I think, talking to the business as well.
And setting the right expectations, not only from the technical perspective, but from the business perspective and from leadership perspective. I have had multiple conversations that leadership is, I want full adoption of AI agentic solutions. And it's like, but how are you measuring that? Just by clicking on an agent or the value that that agent is giving you? And if you're going to measure that value, what are you really looking to it? Let's go back to KPIs, or is about time saved, is about the quality of the outcome. It's also a feedback loop that needs to be put from the end user perspective. We need that feedback from the end user. It's like, is this agent really helping me on my workflows? How can I improve it? Or is hallucinating? How can I reduce that kind of hallucination? So there's also need to be a feedback loop from the agent, from the end user perspective, for us to be able to measure better the quality of what we're building.
Okay, lightning round, because we're almost done here. Okay, Ravi, so we have all these people here, and they're all thinking about AI. What's the one thing they should all know about / worry about / do?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so if there's one thing that you would want all these people to take away so that they could be successful when they do AI, like what's that one thing? And you have to encapsulate it in like 30 seconds. And you're allowed to pass to Rohit to make him answer first if you want.
No, I'm good. So one thing, it is definitely adding value. So you have to take a little bit of risk to that. But at the same time, make sure that you have enough guardrails built in.
Very well said.
Right.
I would say focus on business value. This entire genre of technology, if you will, when it comes to AI and agentic AI, machine learning, I mean, the focus has to be truly on solving business problems. And that's really when you look at it from a business lens, is when you'll truly be able to do a whole bunch of things, including actually success of your use cases and your re-engineering, as well as measure value. So value, value, value. I said 3 things.
Okay, Marcel, you're last at the company whose tagline is work AI that actually works.
Absolutely. Start small. Make sure that you have governance in place. Make sure that you understand your context. Don't index too much on what is the model you're using, but what is the enterprise data that you have, and that you have guardrails and governance around that. But start small and bring security from day one.
Bring security from day one. So look, I want to say thank you to everyone who managed to make it here on day 4 who came to join us. So thank you so much. We're at booth 1333 if you're back at the Venetian today, which should only take, an hour in a cab, so you're good.